And there we go.
I found it. I ended up finding it. But I looked in the search and didn't find it. Thank you. Right to it. So I said, what do I do?
How are you doing? Good, how are you? All right. Knox College, I'm sure had it on. I did not see one of it. If anyone interested in having a student from my social work class, let me know. I lost a placement.
Good. How are you doing?
Yeah. Well,
Can I graduate?
Live streaming.
Barely or?
Seems to be live streaming.
Okay, it's fine. Just fall.
Believe I don't know.
I just go in.
Yes. So just up to what you think you may need, and that you might need just another
Like nobody knows it's live streaming. No, no, it's just, it's not streaming. If nobody knows it's there.
Think about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is your second grade teacher still on track? She's a little youngish. I'm sorry I didn't get back over there Friday.
Oh, you're
I
fine.
was so
It went-
busy.
It went so smoothly.
When the guy who was at your school wasn't initially planning on being here, and he drove along when I talked to him, he was
Yeah, they were good.
we have like 18 sessions at middle schools.
Uh-huh.
And you have to sit. It was fun.
It was easy and the kids were perfectly behaved.
Oh, yeah. And I saw like Sharpie and you and
It was, yeah, it was great and they loved it.
and they're giving different.
Good.
So I'm not 100% sure we got the paper. Don't know for sure. We should.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
had a set of keys down in my office. I don't have any here with me.
Yeah, that's, okay, well, like I said, we're just testing at this point, so.
Right now, we're doing that.
Right.
Can't wait.
It's not that long. But
Hey.
we can start. Just a second. And then we gotta wait till 6.
I'm gonna call to order this public hearing for waiver of state board rules and or school code mandate in regards to the budget increase due to special education. Allison?
Thanks.
Here.
Strontis?
Here.
Klasevich? Here. Lyon?
Yes.
Pickrell? Here. Sharpie?
Here.
Statham?
Here.
Sorry, I don't have a note on who was
Yeah,
gonna
this
talk
is
about
Hank,
that.
sorry. This is Hank.
This is just an informational hearing. If anyone has any concerns, they can bring them forth at this time. We are asking from the General Assembly a waiver of School Code 17-1.5, limitation of administrative costs. Typically, a school district's administrative costs cannot increase more than 5% in any given year from their budget compared to their AFR from the year before. Ours on the calculation sheet increased by 65%, which it is not actually 65%, and I'll explain that here in a minute. But they did increase substantially because we are now taking on the administrative costs that were once shifted to Knox Warren. So how that worked in the past is we would pay a monthly tuition rate to Knox Warren, and included in that tuition rate were administrative costs. Now that we have those costs in-house, they are applied to our calculation for administrative costs for FY18. So that made up about $383,000 of the increased costs from this year. There was also a coding issue with our 2 new dean's positions for this year. They were actually coded as administrative salaries and benefits when the budget was done, and they are actually under the teacher's line item because they are part of the collective bargaining agreement, and they fall under those salaries and benefits. So that will be corrected in the amendment that we do in the spring, and that's explained in the letter to the General Assembly, so that makes up some of the costs, but the majority of them are because of special education. So since this is a 1-year anomaly, because we pulled out of the co-op, we are asking for a waiver from the General Assembly for this. We believe that we should be granted that waiver. Otherwise, we would have to go back and make significant adjustments to the budget to get that administrative cost increase at 5% or less, which would be basically impossible for us to do this year with taking over special education services. So this is just a hearing. The board doesn't have to vote on it. It's just to ask any questions. And if there was anyone in the public who wanted to weigh in and had any questions, they could do so at this time.
Can I ask a question? Do the coordinators do evaluations?
No, they do not do evaluations.
Why are we coding them as administrators then?
They have been coded as administrators in the past. So
That's a coding error as well then. Maybe that should be corrected, maybe we wouldn't be over the 5% then.
we would still be over the 5%.
Taking the 2 dean's positions and the 2 coordinators?
We would be.
Okay. But I think we may have a coding error there as well. So
Is that going to create a Mo issue
On,
by reclassifying those coordinators from what they were under Knox Warren?
They're not sworn, they didn't do evaluations either.
Yes, they did. Under Knox Warren, they were actually hired as administrators and could do, evaluations of staff.
So what's the correct way of handling this moving forward?
In terms of,
I don't know if this is
Correct.
correct or not, but I mean, it's legal. I would recommend keeping it the way it is, because if at some point in the future, the coordinators, for whatever reason, we don't know today, decided we hadn't evaluated them, then we just have to go through this process again. Whereas if we get the cap up to this level now, you can always go underneath it. But if we exceed it again because of the change in practice, we have to go through the hearing again, and do it again. So now we're just raising the cap higher to where we don't necessarily have to get up to it every year, but we're just getting it high enough that we shouldn't have to repeat this process.
But it does make it more difficult to hire staff, requiring type 75.
Well, but
We are currently.
we're not, this waiver does not preclude us or require us to have them evaluate one way or the other. It's just where we code them in the budget. That's all it is. It's not making us spend more money. It's just where we put it in the budget.
and actually, you do not need a type 75 to evaluate at this point in time
Right.
either,
No,
so.
yeah, that lot changed. But it's 5 years.
So, any other questions?
I also am going to take issue with the second paragraph of this justification, because it makes it sound like moving out of the co-op was the most logical thing in the world, and it's led to some staffing issues. So I understand what's being said here, but it also has led to other problems, so we shouldn't, I just am uncomfortable putting on a document that says it's the best thing since sliced bread. It's the justification for its legal form.
I don't know that it's an inaccurate description of why we left though.
Those were the reasons that we presented to the state board last year. Any other questions, comments? Okay, do I have a motion to adjourn this public hearing?
So moved.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Klasmich? Yes. Lyon?
Yes.
Pickrell? Yes. Sharpie?
Yes.
Statham?
Yes.
Banks? Yes.
Sounds redundant to do this again, but I will bang the gavel again and call the Community Unit District 2, number 205, Board of Education regular meeting to order. Allison.
Banks?
Here.
Surratt?
Here.
Klasmich? Here. Lyon?
Here.
Pickrell? Here. Sharpie?
Here.
Statham?
We stand for a moment of silence for the pledge of allegiance. Pledge of allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, this is the part of the meeting where we recognize visitors and do not have any visitor logs in front of me. Is that correct, Ms. Smith? All right. Having no visitors, just checking, making eye contact. Looks like everybody here is usually here. We have some presentations to the board. We'll start with student council representative.
So student council successfully ended off the year with Christmas decorating, angel trees, and writing thankful notes for the whole staff at the high school. And now we have the Sweetheart Swirl coming up in about a month on February 10th, and we chose the theme Starry Night. And so we're going to be working on Spirit Week, pep assembly, wall decorating, dance games during the dance, and a guys volleyball tournament, and we'll be talking about all that in our meeting tomorrow.
Any questions for our student council rep? Great. Thank you very much for that update. And you're free to leave if you need to. Thank you. Next, we have Dr. Asplin giving a presentation regarding our community engagement meetings.
All right. Working? All right. So some of this print is small, and I apologize for that. Where's the screen? Maybe 3 times the size. But I want to briefly go over what the findings were from both the Vision 2030 meetings and the Galesburg on Track Heart and Soul meetings, as they were kind enough to give me their data as well. So we'll start with, the introduction was who are we and what do we want to become? So as we met with folks in the community over our 2 months of meetings and with the Heart and Soul meetings as well, we talked about where are we now as a community, and more importantly, what do we want to be? And so we went about our work trying to figure out what people's dreams were and what their hopes for tomorrow were. So what, why, and when? So we had 15 plus meetings in the community, combining between the 2 entities. We asked for the community's dreams for our students, and as a result of that, we have over 1,200 data points to consider. All right, so out of that, we have all these different inputs from people's dreams, thoughts, votes, however each meeting was done. They were done all differently, but we came up with over 1,200 data points among all of those meetings. So 3 themes finally emerged from all of this, okay? So after looking and sorting through all the data points, we discovered that there were 3 themes that came out loud and strong here. The community would like us to educate students to give them relevant skills that lead to employability, all right? So they want us to have a skill-based curriculum that very explicitly states what those skills are. Now, fortunately, we've been going through that process at the school, so great, going through the essential skills. So we were already moving in that direction as it worked out. So we already started mowing that lawn a while ago. And then secondly, they talked about if we're going to have a skills-based curriculum, what do our buildings need to look like? What do they need to be able to do to assist in that curriculum? So how do we have facilities that assist in skill acquisition? And then third, how do we recognize, respond to, and interact with the community at large? How do we do that on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month, year-to-year basis to make sure that we are not only recognizing, but responding to the changes within our community, whether that be the many different languages that are spoken here, the different socioeconomic levels, the different employability structures, with employers, with other nonprofits, with whomever. How are we interacting with them on a day-to-day basis? Okay. So out of those 3 themes, we looked at the committee structure that we currently have. Okay. So this stage of the presentation is really more my recommendation to the board to how do we deal with this. So we know right now we have a curriculum committee, we have a budget committee, we have a building and grounds committee, we have a recruitment for educational diversity committee, and a policy committee. Okay? And every month, those committees have been asked to report, and some have said, well, we don't have anything to report, or we're going to meet later. And so what we're looking at now is how do we really operationalize those skills to go further on the 3 priority items that the community has said they want. And then beyond that, there used to be here, as most recently as 3 years ago, a district improvement team. Okay? And the district improvement team was a body that oversaw the actions of the school improvement. And those district improvement teams would be comprised of board members, administration, faculty, staff, and community. So there would be a body that would look at the work that the school improvement teams are doing, provide them feedback, and give them direction for the next quarter or whatever. So, how do we put this all together? And I know this is very brief, but this is an overview. How do we put this all together? So my recommendation is step one, the Board of Education agenda is changed to reflect the 3 focus areas. Okay, so we will do some work, and I'll probably do a lot of it through email and back and forth just to get some feedback from everybody at first. But talk about how are we going to rearrange our board agenda to make sure that we're actually attacking those 3 focus areas on a month-to-month basis. So we're making sure that we're not ignoring what the community said they wanted. After we get through step 1, Board of Education committees, this is small print over here. Board of Education committees create actionable goals with distinct outcomes. Okay? So as you look at those, I'm going to go backwards for a second. You look at these 3 themes. So we have relevant skills that lead to employability. So 2 board committees there would have, one would have a great amount of interaction with that, and that's the curriculum. Okay, so the curriculum committee would be working towards some goals that would lead towards what the community's prioritized here with relevant skills that lead to employability. Okay. Also, the budget committee. We can make all the curricular decisions we want, and if the budget committee says, well, there's not enough money for that, then obviously we need to make sure we keep that in the forefront of our minds. Facilities that assist in skill acquisition. We've got the Building and Grounds Committee, and once again, the Budget Committee. Okay. And then third, recognition and response and interaction with the community. We have the Recruitment for Education Diversity and the Policy Committee. Okay. And policy would intersperse in the others as well. But those committees can be charged with focusing much more narrowly than on these particular focus areas to come up with goals, and we can have action meetings, work teams, talk about how to create those goals, what data points do we want, what outcomes are we looking for, things of that sort. But that's the way to really get this work moving in the right direction. So when we hit those goals, we can then go down here to number 3, and the school improvement teams will create sub-goals related to the Board of Education committee goals. So if the curriculum committee comes up with some skills that they would like to see or put into the curriculum, we then have to meet with the buildings to make sure that that worked from the high school backwards down to the elementaries to make sure we were putting that in a rational manner so we could have expectations that those things could be met. Okay, and if we had a building committee that was wanting to talk about alterations to a building, we want to make sure that the people in that building were having part of that discussion. So if we said, King needed an outdoor education center, we would be talking to King about an outdoor education center. We wouldn't just be doing that to them. We would make sure they were part of that process. Okay, and then step 4, the district improvement team would meet quarterly to review progress and make recommendations. So you have the priority areas, you have the committees that would make goals, you have the committees that would also then meet through the district improvement team to review the progress towards those stated goals, and then they would give feedback towards how to move forward in the next three months. So ideally, as we meet quarterly, we could communicate that progress as we moved along. And then finally, communication. So if we're doing all this work, how are we going to make sure that people understand what it is we're doing? So a plan is created to communicate the district's progress towards goal achievement. This plan must account for both internal and external publics and for multi-directional information exchange. That's a big way of saying make sure we're not just talking, we're also listening. Okay? So that these committees and this communication plan can make sure that we're not getting far afield of what we said we wanted to do, and we're getting feedback from the group to make sure we're moving in the direction we said we wanted to. All right? So, as I said, just a very broad overview at this point. But what I would recommend that the first step is that we start the work of trying to rearrange our agenda to start discussing these things very specifically and planning meetings for the committees to actually sit down and talk about making discernible goals that we can then work with the building committees to start on end of this year, beginning of next year. Any questions? I know I just threw away my time.
And you have time to process because we will be coming back to this.
Right.
As a discussion item in tonight's meeting to go along with some of the other items that we have on our discussion agenda.
Right, just wanna make sure, as long as I'm standing up here, any clarification, something that didn't make sense.
Is this document something we have?
Not yet, we will get it as long as we wanna continue to move forward. Okay, I assume. Thank you.
Okay, moving forward to the approval of the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve?
Second.
Is there any item on the consent agenda that anyone would like to have removed? Okay. Allison?
Contis?
Aye.
Glasswitch? Aye. Lyon?
Yes.
Pickrell? Aye. Sharkey?
Aye.
Statham?
Aye.
Banks? Yep.
Okay, moving on to our action items. The first, consider approval of the non-patronization policy, Dr. Asplund.
Thank you. I just left that on there as a placeholder to make sure people didn't think we forgot about it. We agreed last time to basically table this and go through the regular policy adoption. So I'm recommending we table this to continue to do that. I just wanted to make sure that everybody understood that we recognized the change from last week.
Questions? Okay. Next item, consider approval of the cottage rehab 5-year service agreement. Mr. Flater.
Thank you. Before you should have actually two different contracts. The first one is for professional services. This contract, we currently have this contract in place with Cottage, but it's a year-to-year contract. What this contract is going to do, there's two changes in it. Number one, the first one is on page 1. We have taken a couple of the concerns that we had in the advertising contract for the scoreboard, and we thought, in my conversations with Dr. Asplund, probably didn't belong there, but yet they may belong in our services contract that we have with Cottage. So those two items primarily were they make a proposal, or not a proposal, they make a presentation at my seasonal parent and student athlete meeting for each fall, winter, and spring. And then they also provide our coaches with education and consultation and different things in terms of helping them service our athletes better. The second one is under 3A. It changes this our normal contract from year to year to a 5-year contract. And those are the two, really the only two differences between this contract and what we've done in the past. Now, field any questions that you may have.
Do I have, before we begin questions, do I have a motion to approve? Second? Second?
Second.
Okay, now, questions.
I don't see the cost.
It's $10,000 a year.
I thought it had to be over 10,000.
This is the difference between the two contracts that you have with Cottage Rehab is this contract is our services contract that we normally do every year with them. And on page 6, it says $1,000 a month for 10 months, which is $10,000 a year. And then we keep track of our athletic trainers' hours, and they provide to us 500 hours. Anything over that is $30 an hour.
So we don't like paying travel money or anything?
No. But we do get that, we incur that cost with time. So if primarily he travels during the football season, during the fall to our away football games. He did in St. Louis this year. We did something different this year because when we're down in St. Louis. But when he goes to Rock Island or Peoria or that, we're charged time, not travel.
Any other questions?
No, Mr. Flager. Have you reviewed this? I'd like to take a look at it, because if you look at number 2, obligations of service provider is basically don't perform the services that they agree to provide. And I don't like a contract that says, you pay me and I'll do what I want to do for you. What they're after. I mean, it sounds like it's worked.
Yeah, and our relationship with college, and as I said, Mr. Stathan, this contract is the same contract for however long we've been working with Cottage Rehab. It's identical to that, other than the 2 points that I.
Right, but this is the first time I've read it.
Right. But our relationship with Cottage Rehab has been fantastic. They're,
Yeah, but if you read the contract literally, if we tell them we want them at event A, the contract that says they can go, no, I don't want to go to event A. That's what it says. If you say, I want you to come to swim meets, they can say, no, I don't want to come to swim meets. Or it says, are you going to be at the football game Friday night? And they go, no, we don't have anybody available, sorry. And that's what the contract says. I'm not saying that's what they've done.
right.
I'm just saying that's what the contract says. It says they don't have to do anything they don't want to do.
Is that 2A? Is that where you're?
Yeah. And it's like me hiring you as an athletic director and you saying, well, I'll do what I want to do. I'll do what I agree to do.
So essentially, yeah,
I want to know what I'm getting for $1,000 a month.
So if I'm understanding correctly, Member Chapin, what you'd like under 2A is maybe some subpoints about some kind of descriptor language saying, you know, this many home matches during these many sporting events, or maybe even not that specific, but agree to perform or work at this many. You want something more specific than.
I'm not, you know, in the past, when we tried having our own athletic trainer, it's been a couple of years, which was an adventure in and of itself. All of us parents with kids knew that. But, you know, we were able to tell that trainer, that's your job. You're going to be at every possible athletic event unless there's a conflict, and then we'll, Mr. Flater, I assumed if we had an athletic trainer right now that was employed full-time, and the trainer came to him and said, well, there's a baseball game and softball game at the same time, she'd work it out with Mr. Flater on which one to attend.
right. We have to
Because we can't have a whole team of trainers.
No.
What I don't understand of this agreement, and it's been, you know, 8 years since I've had a kid doing sports at the high school, so I don't understand, are they coming to every athletic event?
No, not every, because we only get 500 hours. And we set up a schedule before each season, like I've already sent them the schedule for the spring. And, you know, and we target those games and those contests and some practices.
I guess that's what A ought to say, is what you just said.
Right, and it does say it in, I'd have to find it, it does say it in this contract. Schedule.
Yeah, there was somebody.
It does say it in the contract.
Under the school's obligations, I think is what you're talking about.
Yeah, but it does talk about, and I'm sorry, I can't find it.
I think it's in school obligations,
Yeah, I think-
1.B.
Yeah.
Prior to the commencement of services, provide a mutually agreed
Yes,
upon schedule of
thank
events
you.
to be covered by service provider.
And that's what we do right now, anyway.
Under the,
I'm sorry, Mrs. Marcus. I guess if I'm interpreting what
I
we're
guess what I
considering
would like.
mutually agreed,
Yeah, I'd like to say something like, shall perform I don't know, there's some months we use them more than others.
Yeah, in the fall, we use them a lot more, obviously with football and concussion protocol and high impact. We use them in the fall more. His hours are, there's a lot more hours he spends in the fall than he does in the winter and then in the spring.
Does my concern make sense to you?
Yes. I think from the standpoint of a 5-year agreement, we have to get in route. I believe your safe cottage was proposing unless they try to approach.
And I'm not trying to say anything bad about cottage rehab. I don't mean to be doing that.
It's the same with River Plus.
Yeah.
It's the turkeys, so.
Yeah. I just,
If that.
I want you in control
Yeah,
of what they're doing, in a sense. I want you to be able to say, look, we need you at these events. Or, you know, I've got something unique and I need you to cover this. Because that's what we would do if we had our own athletic trainer. We would tell that trainer where they needed to be. And I understand this saves us money over hiring our own trainer.
Mhm.
I mean, I know that's why we're doing it.
yeah,
But I would just like it where we have a little control over, you know, this is what we need from you under this contract.
Jeff, do they have one trainer who works with us, or do they have a staff that, so that if they had a trainer, you had a specific event that you needed somebody at, and that one individual that normally takes care of it isn't available, that they would put another person in there. So if you were able to say, we absolutely have to have these events covered, and they would have to find a way to cover. I
right.
think that's what.
And we've had that problem. When I first came here, they actually didn't have a full-time person hired. And so they worked with Knox College and maybe Monmouth too, and sent somebody over to cover the activities events that we needed to have covered. So they did do that.
I think what Wayne is saying is that if you say, in order for us to be in control of the situation, that we need, it's paramount that we have a trainer at these particular events. And it's going to be their responsibility to make sure that they cover that, because you have indicated that those are certain events that have to be covered. And it's going to allow them to make sure that they come up with someone to step in if their regular person who takes care of us isn't available. I think that's what it's talking about.
And I guess I'm looking at some kind of language like, you know, they will cover all events upon reasonable request of ourselves in here. School.
Mr. Feeney, are you writing some of this down too?
I think he knows exactly what I'm talking about.
I'd be happy to contact Mr. Flair, what we could hammer out language running by cottage.
It could be something as simple as that, you know, cover all events upon reasonable request of schools.
Well, I think we're still talking. Yeah,
Yeah, there's a motion on the floor.
which is allowing us to talk, which we may, I mean, that may be the decision that we table.
We don't have a time crunch, right? Because the other contract is contingent on this.
Well, that's the time.
Is there a time on the other piece? The scoreboard's about to go cold for a few months.
No, there isn't. It's not important that it's not crucial that we approve it tonight.
Correct, especially since we got Thursday or Friday.
Yeah, we got late Thursday.
Yeah. So,
And the only things that were changed on there is, as Mr. Slater said, were the 2 items from the other contract we have.
And I guess my final question would be, is there anybody else, I mean, I know this is who you've been using for a while, you, Lee.
Since I've been here.
Yeah. I know they were doing it for a few years before you got here. I think probably since we got rid of our athletic trainer.
Yes.
Is there anybody else in the community that provides these services?
Not that I'm aware of. But I also haven't gone out and looked because of my satisfaction with the services that they provide. I haven't really felt the need to go out there.
I was very happy with their services after my knee surgery. And I compared to one I had, so the previous knee was much better than I did. I'm not paid to say that.
So if, I'll speak with Mr. Feeney, Mr. Statham, but essentially write in some assurances that we have to protect our end.
Yeah, we may be able to just tweak it with 2 sentences, maybe one.
Well, I would agree, this is a 5-year contract, though, which takes me back to your other question, member statement, is that if we're entering into a 5-year contract, is there any obligation on our part to have to request bids from any other providers that might want to do this? No.
Not for this type of contract, it's a unique medical services.
Okay. With all transparency, my son was a frequent flyer of the current trainer. It was a great relationship. They're on first name basis and everything. I think they get each other's text number. So I agree with member Statham, as long as we could get some of that language, because it is a 5-year contract and I want to be able to be comfortable knowing that whoever might be in this position in a couple of years isn't having any challenges with the contract that we approved. So I think with that being said, we would need an amended motion to table this until next board meeting, right?
Correct.
I would make a motion that we table, particular item to go next.
Do I have a second?
Point of order, point of reasonable motion.
Same.
It was just-
Same.
yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, it was Jan.
Right.
Yeah, it was the same motion as I.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Slater. So due to that motion to table action item B until we can get some language shored up, that will also mean that we table action item number, or letter C, because that is contingent upon B. So B and C will be tabled until February's board meeting.
So I would make a motion that we table item C as well.
You don't have to.
Okay, next we will consider the approval of a resolution to abate series 2011B and 2014B alternate revenue bonds. Mrs. Ham.
I've put in front of everyone's face tonight kind of a current state of our bonds. Each year, we have to go through the process of abating our B series bonds, which we have a 2011 B series and a 2014. These are the bonds that were secured through the 1% sales tax. So we have to go through the process of abating those so that they do not end up on our levy. This is a process that we go through every year. I've provided you a copy of all of our outstanding bonds and where we sit with those bonds in terms of payoffs. Also looking at the projections of the ramp ups for some of the payments in the future. This is going to be important with Dr. Aslin's committees that are coming up with facilities for us to be able to look at not only what we're currently paying on our outstanding bonds, but some of these bonds have pretty significant increases in payments, particularly over the next 10 years. So it's just really for informational purposes tonight. The only thing that I'm asking the board to approve is that we abate the 2011, 2014 B series bonds, and that those bonds are paid for through the alternate revenue sales tax that we collect.
Those are the ones highlighted in yellow.
Yes.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do you have any questions about Mrs. Ham's information?
Since you attached the information, those last 2 pages say what we owe outstanding, is that outstanding debt is? Can you explain those last 2 pages to me?
Sure. So the first page
The one titled Alternative Revenue Bond Company.
Correct. So those are those two B series bonds that we're abating right now. So these are our payouts, and this is a projection of EAV growth and the projection of revenues. And then it also gives what our payments are. So you'll see that, for instance, for tax year 2017 and fiscal year 2018, that our payments are going to be 1.7 million, the alternate revenue. And then you can see how each of those payments kind of ramps up over time. And then the next page.
I have a question on this page.
Sure.
The count explain remaining sales tax revenue. What is that? It's the third from the left.
So this is what they're projecting, sales tax revenue, so that's what we're projecting, of having $2.4 million in revenue that we generate. And so we're looking at potentially having a remaining sales tax of $679,000.
And where is that going currently?
We receive that, and that's put into an account in our bonds and interest account that's specifically to pay the alternate revenue bonds.
Wait. What does it mean remaining sales tax revenue?
That's money we're collecting through the 1 cent sales tax above and beyond.
Okay, so it is money available to pay other bonds, and right now we're just putting it in the bank.
Correct.
Or we could do it to pay for a window at Silas Willard,
Right.
or
Unfortunately, with these projections, there were some flawed assumptions when the original 2011 bonds were sold. There was a very aggressive projection on the increase of 1% sales tax. And so these aren't necessarily the revenues that we're seeing. These are projections that the bonding company has. But they're also based on the original projections from 2011.
Well, and I want to make sure we have full transparency here. I asked Mrs. Ham to change the assumptions. So when, as she alluded to earlier, I believe 8% was the increase.
8% annual increase.
So when the original 1 cent sales tax went through, which was in 2010-11, there was a presentation done that said that we presumed that there would be a growth of 8% in that revenue every year. Okay. So what I've asked her to do is to represent a 0% growth on that. So to just give you an idea, I'm not saying either's right, either's wrong. I'm just telling you the approach. So I got this, Farmington School District got this money the same time Galesburg did in 2011. Rather than in putting a positive index on it, my projections always included a negative 1.8% index. So I presumed less a year. So that any money that was left over, we built our budget around a presumption of less revenue. So then when there was extra revenue, we were able to pay for things out of the leftover money. Rather than building a budget based on revenue you may not be able to get, we based it on a more conservative revenue estimate. So I asked Mrs. Ham and she asked Stiefel to re-project how much money we have, so that I think it's a much better idea to go off a conservative revenue estimate rather than an 8% index. So this represents no growth through 2042, well, fiscal year 2042, even year 2042. So that remaining sales tax revenue is based on a 0% growth in our business.
And if you go back to the payment schedule, one of the things that the budget committee and our committees, as we're doing our work, the goals that we're going to want to look at with facility improvements that we're going to need, is that you'll see that some of these payments ramp up significantly in like 2037. So if you look at the 2014 B-series bonds, it goes from $140,000 a year payment to a $1.2 million a year payment. So we'll want to budget some of those excess 1% funds so that when we get to that point, so we don't have to significantly increase taxes, that we have that money sitting there to be able to pay that difference, so that burden isn't on the taxpayer in 2037.
Exactly.
So we don't have all of that extra 1% revenue to spend, because we're going to need to save that to pay these kind of balloon payments in essence in the future.
If I was to look at our accounts right now, I guess we do have accounts
and look at that carefully, obviously. Where is this money going?
It's going into the bond and interest account.
It's going to the bond and interest account, so we should see a significant bump every year.
It's not necessarily, this is a projection, so we will see an increase, yes,
Do you mean in our reserves?
Yes.
yes,
We should.
yes.
Yeah, because even last year, we had 676,000.
So the important thing is not to burn a hole in your pocket with money and to make sure that you are cognizant, and we are.
My pockets aren't
cognizant.
this big.
Exactly. But we want to make sure that we are responsible for the boards and students and teachers and parents in 2037, so that we make sure that this isn't a big, huge shocker, and at that time, all of a sudden, oh, you owe an extra $1 million, we didn't save.
So we'll hopefully work on an investment plan where we can, maybe do some long-term conservative investing, so that then that money will be available when those payments ramp up in the future. And then hopefully we'll have some extra as well beyond that investment plan, so that we can use some of those extra monies to do things now as well.
Can you then explain the next one?
The next page are the remainder of our outstanding bonds. So the first sheet was the alternate revenue bonds that are secured through the 1% sales tax, and these are the remaining bonds that we have. So you'll see there's a series of bonds. There's a 2011 A and C bond, 2013, 2014 A, 2014 QZAB, and then a 2015 that was a working cash bond. And so these are the remaining bonds that we have and what our total payment is each year.
And in this one, you showed the 3.1% growth.
Just for this
For
year,
this year.
just for this year. And so you'll see that it's a 0% assumption after that. So we knew that EAV increased 3.1% from 2015 to 2016. That represents an increase in EAV.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I think it's important just to understand that part of this is making sure that this conversation is not held off until 2037.
Yes.
Right. I appreciate the work that was done on the penny sales tax. I admit that when I had first moved back from Chicago, I was one of the people that went out and pushed for people to vote for it. I think hindsight is always a better outlook, and if we knew then what we know now, some different guesstimations may have been made. However, here we are, and these are the numbers that we are going to be stuck with. So we need to budget and we need to function with that in mind.
We're proud of the buildings that we put up and have renovated. And all of them look nice, and are serving children well.
I'm so glad that you said that, Member Lyon, because that's going to come up in our discussion.
Oh, thanks for the note.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay, then Allison, can you call vote?
Lyon?
Yes.
Pippa? Aye. Sherby?
Aye.
Saban?
Aye.
Banks? Aye. Surratt?
Aye.
Palovich? Yes.
Okay, next action item E, consider the approval of the discretionary leave request for Cecil Rednour. Dr. Esplin.
Thank you. Mr. Rednauer has been off on workman's comp leave for an extended period of time. He is exhausted all available leave. And so we're left with, at this point, either telling him that he's out of leave and he has to come back to work, or he's asking for, and he's written me a letter, asking for discretionary leave from the board, which is unpaid, but it's just basically saying that we're going to allow him to stay a district employee through his next doctor's appointment, at which point we'll have to make another decision. But what I'm asking you to do tonight is to approve his discretionary leave through January 27th when his doctor's appointment.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Questions?
Well, one isn't getting paid, do we still pay benefits during that period?
No, they've all been exhausted.
Does he have health insurance?
If he wants to be on COBRA, he can.
Okay.
questions? Allison?
Pickrell. Aye. Sherby.
Aye.
Statham.
Aye.
Banks. Surratt.
Aye.
Paskevich. Aye. Lyon.
Yes.
Okay, next, consider the approval of the resolution agreement on the OCR docket number 05-17-1186. Mr. Feeney.
The agreement is before you. The only thing I'll point out is we had hoped to have this agreement from OCR for your December meeting, which is why a couple of the dates will say 17, so we'll cross that out and put an 18 on it. Otherwise, the agreement is substantially the same as we discussed 2 months ago. I'm happy to answer any questions. If there's questions that involve the underlying issue, we would have to table this until the session because I would be very careful not to raise any student-specific issues in open session.
Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Questions for Mr. Feeney that we can discuss in open session? Questions that need to be discussed in closed session so that I know if we need to table this. Okay, Allison.
Sherby.
Aye.
Statham.
Aye.
Banks. Surratt.
Aye.
Paskevich. Aye. Lyon.
Yes.
Pickrell. Aye.
Okay, next we will move to the personnel agenda. Consider the approval of the personnel agenda. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Any questions for Mr. Bradburn? Allison?
Statham.
Aye.
Banks. Aye. Surratt.
Aye.
Paskevich. Aye. Lyon.
Yes.
Pickrell. Aye. Sherby.
Okay, now we move into our favorite part of the evening, discussion items. First on our agenda is the videotaping of our board meetings. Dr. Asplund.
We're leaving this on here as a static item for now. I don't think the committee has anything to add. We did purchase something for district office use here to do a lot of videotape. Thanks for the staff. It's called a Padcaster. We saw it out at the school board convention for those of you that went down there and saw it. It's not here yet. Sam, you said it was going to be here.
Should be here any day.
Any day.
Waiting
So
for it.
that we'll give that one a shot too. I mean, we have used it a little bit at the board convention. I don't know if it will work for our board meetings or not. We'll definitely have lots of uses for it here. Hopefully next month we'll show you that.
What did you give me the camera?
It doesn't do any differently than how it operates. You have boom mics, you can move it up a little closer, it has a teleprompter, if we want to do something with that, we'll use that one for other things. It's got some really neat student uses if it turns out. Another fun gadget for Mr. Ulrich to try out there too. Get all this stuff going up there and all this fun toys he has up there in his room, which I don't get how to use, but unfortunately he does.
Any other questions? Moving on to the next discussion item, certified substitute pay increase. Dr. Asplund.
We're leaving this on. Once again, we wanted to have some answers for you, but we also were charged with getting some feedback from staff, and because of weather and the vacation schedule, we've not had time to do that. So I just wanted to keep it on here so everybody knew we weren't forgetting, and we're very much trying to get that feedback, and next month I'm very confident in having it, so we can further that conversation.
In the discussion we had previously, Raina talked about the issue of retired people. What do we need to do to move forward in encouraging members of General Assembly?
Well, and I have started work on that, and I've talked to members of the General Assembly, and we'll continue to do that, raise awareness there, because that's seemingly an easy change. If we could get that done down in Springfield, but I think I just heard everybody's eyes roll as I said something about Springfield, so we'll see.
Did I see something on Facebook about some changes from the ROE, highlighting some changes for sub-certification? Am I making this up in my mind?
We have an ROE meeting next week, I can tell you.
If I'm not mistaken, the ROE page posted something about some changes about, ability for reimbursements.
They were, yeah, there was definitely, did they enact it? Last I heard is they were seriously discussing trying to get reimbursement for the fees up front so that they get people in the system.
The way I read granted, it was just on my feed and I was just scrolling, but it made it look like it was a done deal. They were,
Yeah, I heard talk, I hadn't heard final, so it'd be great if that is.
It makes it easier.
okay.
And I did want to point out, I've talked to a couple of retired teachers that were doing a long-term. And when we increased the sub-pay to $85 last year, they actually lost money on the 30-day thing. It was $50 that way. So I just want to caution us when we do this. Because we went from paying them 75, then 100, then per diem. And then we went to paying them 85 for 20 days. And then per diem. So while it looked like everybody got a raise, they actually lost money. I mean, it didn't stop either one of them from doing it, but just to have that out there, so we are cautious about that.
Good to know.
Yes, thank you. Any other comments on pay increase of student pay increase?
This is all
Okay,
teachers, it's not looking at paraprofessionals. Because we have a problem filling those positions, correct?
Yes, we do. We were starting with teachers, yeah, that's where we were starting the conversation.
that could be a future agenda item once we figure this one out.
Did we do something about reimbursing them or helping them with the licensing cost or something, no? Did we do that?
Yes.
We do.
Okay.
I think they're requesting advances to help pay for that. The biggest roadblock lately is the state board's backed up 6 weeks in school.
Yeah, I look,
First, I don't expect a child to do that.
They don't have enough people for sure.
If you go to the state board office, there are whole floors there. They lay off some.
oh, fine. Okay. Next discussion item will be the policy review of sections 1, 2, and the current press policies. Dr. Asplin.
Well, there's a great number of policies there. And I sent you over the weekend, my recommendation for, what revisions I would recommend we made. You can go any direction you want to go, but, I don't remember how many there were. There's a lot.
29. There were 29 policy updates in our press packet this month.
Yeah,
29.
That's just the present updates, not just section 1 and 2. Well, section 1's really short.
Do we have questions regarding or suggestions for revisions for sections 1 and 2?
Why do we include in the policy manual the procedures? For example, I'm looking at now an exhibit, the checklist for filling board vacancies by appointment. It's sort of redundant, it just makes a different way of looking at the same thing as the policy before that. Doesn't it add just space in all this?
Well, as you'll see, the exhibits and the administrative procedures, we don't ask for approval on. Those are just there, it's for your review. But some are included and some are not for press and our policy manual. But when I gave you the recommendations, none of them were E's or APs, because those typically aren't approved by the board. Those are just addendums for people to be able to see what the examples are.
I don't think that answers my question. In our policy manual, we have all these exhibits and things. Why do we even have them in there?
I don't know. I will tell you, other districts I've been in, the exhibits are in a different binder.
Because administrative procedures would be a different
Just the thought.
I don't know.
Would you like to make a suggestion about the board policy packet, Maureen? That we have our board policies in one packet and administrative practices in another?
I think it's an excellent suggestion, Madam President.
That would be no problem.
Look, we have one revision done. Next question.
Okay, I have a question about, let's see. Board policy 2. Well, it's communications to and from the board.
Policy 2.
Yeah, 2.140. It's on page 32, I believe, in our packet.
No, just point of clarification, Member Glasnovich, is this just in our own review of section 2, or is this the press packet?
No, this is our,
Our own.
okay, it said number 2, provide the board, this is under the superintendent or designee shall, provide the board such as in the board meeting packet with all emails that are received and any feedback regarding. I don't think that's being done, nor do I think that that is necessary to be done.
Well, I will tell you, we sort of comply with that. If we get any questions about anything from the board meeting packet in particular, we do copy all those questions and you get those. So I only read it as pertaining to the board packet.
Okay,
So
maybe that's,
depends on how you view it.
Right.
But that's how we do it.
on my first reading,
Yeah.
just reading it, it made it sound like that maybe all emails that are received, all.
Yeah, I would hope we don't need that. But we do comply with it if it's just germane to the board packet, so you get that like you got today.
Okay, and I have another one. 6. Committees. I noticed that the curriculum committee is not, unless I'm missing it, is not on,
There's policy.
nor is policy. It's 2:150. The parent teacher advisory committee is there,
Which is a standing committee.
and the behavioral interventions committee is there. And I don't know who's on that.
Well, those are two that you have to have. They have to be once a year
So that's,
to review
so
that.
that's not one of our monthly reports that we just don't put it on monthly.
Right.
Right, they are by statute, those are.
And point of clarification, the parent-teacher advisory committee is, Mr. Bradburn actually leads that. That's a code of conduct review committee. So every time
Okay. so
they
that's-
bring up that code of
Right,
conduct,
code of conduct.
that's what that committee is.
And the behavioral interventions, then,
What do you have?
Well, the behavioral interventions committee, according to this, is coordinated by the executive director of the special education cooperative. This is why we review policies, folks. We're learning a lot of
that's the
stuff.
reason we're doing all of this exciting stuff.
And we can add the curriculum, in policy, to me, those are just ones that had to be in existence. So
Okay, so the ones that are listed here are ones that are actually required by statute. Okay,
And we would need to remove that verbiage about the cooperative special ed director.
that's fair, yeah, we should,
we no longer have.
we would just amend that to say the special education director.
Okay,
And
so,
that may tie into when we do the indicator 4 every year, we'll put together the behavior committee and we review the policy and procedures, so it usually happens usually in the springtime.
okay, so what I've heard so far is we have a suggestion from Member Lyon to separate out board policy and admin procedures. We've got a suggestion, do you have is there a suggestion about clarifying 2.140, Member Glasnovich, regarding emails.
Is the understanding, or maybe it could be better stated to indicate strictly between, maybe that's clear to everybody, just at my first reading, it was not. I took it a different way. I just took it as any email that the superintendent gets, he's expected to, correspond with the board with regard to how he responds.
And that would be.
And that would be ridiculous.
Yes.
You have that written down now.
Okay. So we'll work on some language to clarify that it is pertinent to board packet. I think.
I'll fix it.
And then we have,
Standing committee, we need to change the executive director of the special education cooperative to the special education director.
okay, and then do we believe that we need to add the curriculum committee to, these are our, so just for clarification, every Board of Education in the state is provided what the state requires us, but then we are also allowed to make sure that outside of that which is required by law, we can then revise them pertinent to our particular business and the way that we operate in our district. So we're not changing anything that is required by law, we're just making sure that our policies reflect what we're actually doing. And if they're not, then is the policy outdated? Do we need to make sure that we're attending business that we haven't been attending, et cetera? Is this all making sense? I just wanted to clarify for those in the gallery. Okay. So does anyone feel moved to add the curriculum to our standing committee policy? For the policy committee? Are we feeling like, yes?
See, I'm confused at how we put the policy committee started, because we had policy, it said we had a policy committee. Now we don't have a policy committee.
It doesn't say we have.
No, we didn't have one until recently.
Right.
And the reason we did it was, the member said it was in our policy manual.
That's why we're reviewing it.
That's why so.
It wasn't.
Right.
Unless it's somewhere else.
Aha.
Right, because
If
we
we
had
had a
it, right.
searchable policy manual.
And I'm not got a question. I said email on Friday. I'm not got an answer.
That would be so wonderful too.
Oh.
Okay. I would be inclined to add those two to our standing board committees, but I don't know that anybody else feels that way, and I'm not the majority member on this, so.
I don't have a problem with one or the other, I just thought since it was listing committees, if someone, for example, someone who was not a board member got and looked on here and looked at our policy, and they looked at what committees that we had, just because they wanted to know, and they're not there, but yet we have them, it would seem to our benefit to have listed
I don't
that
think
we
we have
have.
any plans not to get rid of them, so it wouldn't hurt. You can fix, or you can amend that policy.
Okay. And then, Ms. Boone, you have a note to add. All right, and then, did someone say they had another? Yes.
240 has to do with the board member qualifications. This is always sort of bothering. One believes in one person, one vote. And we have 4 board members from in Galesburg Township and 3. It seems like the 3 of us are, I don't believe 3/7 of the population lives outside Galesburg Township. And it doesn't say we have to change it, but it just seems under the spirit of one person, one vote, it should reflect the population. Might make myself.
So what you're saying is it's not representing the population of the area, the representation that we provide.
That's correct.
Does not sync with the representation of residents.
I don't believe so.
I would guess that you would be right, yes.
Is this part of the policy statute though?
Well, you can't change it. There's a process under the school code to eliminate elected districts. It's convoluted and it requires a vote in a boundary called a congressional township. It's very confusing, but you can't change that simply by changing your policy. just by, you can't by policy change your voting districts.
But aren't we sort of undermining the voting power of the people that live in Galesburg by having this policy?
Well, and I don't know when this was added, or when this was changed, or when it was created, but I do know some history here. I mean, the Colebrook, and Cameron, that area out there used to come to Galesburg, and Watauga used to come to Galesburg. Well, I'm saying even further west, farther west. Well, I'm saying keep going farther. And so I'm sure there used to be a much greater population outside of Galesburg Township. And now, obviously, there isn't, especially because fewer farmers. Right. But I'm saying, if this was created in the 40s or 50s, you know, there was a lot greater representation out there. And so maybe that policy was created then, if you want to entertain that, to look at, you know, that boundary issue, that you know, there's nothing saying you can't do it.
Mr. Lyon, essentially, the process to change is a ballot question to eliminate board districts. And if I remember correctly, you have to have a majority vote in every congressional township. And what makes that difficult is congressional townships can fall where you may have 3 registered voters in a congressional township. And then what happens is you can have the absurd result where everyone else in the school district can in theory vote for it. And 2 people in that congressional township, which has 3 registered voters, could vote against it, and the entire measure would fail. So it's up to the board whether you want to pursue that, but I'm happy to explain that in more detail. That's my rough recollection of how that process works, but that's the way you eliminate more districts.
Just as I'm not sure who has this data easily accessible. I'd be curious what the population is in these 2 areas. Is there, through this GEO, whatever the counties all have, don't they have all that information punching a few numbers? I'd be curious to know how diluted the Galesburg votes are relative to the non-Galesburg Township votes. Does that make any sense?
It's like the Senate versus the House.
Yeah, except we have our own gym.
So while we're not proposing a change to that particular policy, you are interested in some data memorialized?
Yeah, I think so, because it just doesn't pass the smell test, it never has.
So we're looking for the population of each township, so.
Or just the area of 4 versus 3 representation.
But outside of Galesburg.
Township versus Galesburg Township.
Centerville versus city.
Okay. Any other, I have some, but I'm waiting for folks. Are there any other questions? In section 2:210. I'm sorry, I don't have a page number for that. I'm wondering if there is just a repeating paragraph, and maybe it's needed in both areas, but I just wonder. So it's the organizational 2:2.
8.3.
Thank you. So under the organizational board of education meeting, you see the first paragraph begins during a March meeting, then you've got points 1 through 4, and then you see the paragraph that says during an April board meeting in even number years. And then if you go to the very end of that policy, it says it again, during an April board meeting in even number years. Do we need that paragraph in both places? I'm just wondering. So 2.210, you've got duplicate paragraphs, one at the end of points 1 through 4, and then one is the same paragraph at the very end of the policy. And I'm just wondering if it's legitimately a duplicate paragraph or if we need it in both areas.
I guess it's just saying that in each case, since it doesn't have a separate thing to indicate how when it's done in both cases, it's put it out twice, it's an open night. You've got the organization of the Board of Education meeting, and then you've got the election of officers, and in both cases, the board considers these matters, or in each case, I mean.
Right, okay.
So maybe that's the reason it does it that way, because there's not a third paragraph indicating in the above two instances, this is done in the Board of
Okay. That's what I just wanted to. And then my only other point was in 2.240, 2:240. Board policy development, under policy adoption and dissemination, it states the board policies are available for public inspection in the district's main office during regular office hours. Copy request should be made pursuant to board policy 2:250, access to district public records. I'm wondering, could we add that it's also available online, since we do have a copy online? Or is it required that we just have a paper copy? I mean, it is, that's where
It is online.
it is online. So I'm just wondering if we want to just amend that so that we can also state that it's available online. Just noting, I don't know if we have to put any kind of notification on there that if amendments are made, I don't know, do we need to do that, or is it just everything will be dated the way it's dated, and then when we have updates, we update it? Okay, I'm just clarifying, thank you. Okay, that was all I had for sections 1 and 2. Did anybody else have anything for sections 1 and 2? Because I have a slew for the press packet. Did anybody have questions for the press packet? Since this is our job, policy is our job. The number one dated job. Just gonna clarify that for those of you who might be getting bored in the gallery.
You can project this so you can. It will run. Really?
The website's actually very.
We're all hovering over.
Trying to pull it up earlier and we couldn't get it.
I know.
No, it's working now.
Oh, it's working
Oh,
now.
it's working
Good,
now,
give it time.
right.
I got it.
I read a policy, you can't have to.
I've been bouncing around on it.
Oh, yeah.
I started working about 45 minutes ago.
Yeah, mine's not working either.
Sure.
Still isn't working?
Huh, okay.
This side of the room is.
Fine. You guys-
Hold your breath.
Two sides.
Okay, I think 2:26, I thought they were already published, so that should be a pretty easy fix. So if we look, now we've moved on to the policy changes that the packet, the state has directed us to, and Dr. Asplin's notes on those. Policy 2:, oh, might have missed, okay, it might be, okay. I was just commenting that I thought we'd already published it, so. Now, policy 4:15, identity protection. I'm curious, to your point, Dr. Asplin, about items 5 and 6, right?
Okay, yeah.
I'm just wondering how often we might have challenges with identities being stolen. You know,
Which one?
4:15.
Oh, because because, the reason I recommended items 5 and 6 be left up there was because we had to notify everybody individually every time we made that change.
Oh, okay.
And so it was just gonna create a massive paperwork nightmare for everybody here. We violated policy that, I mean, if we ever did anything, we'd update the employees anyway.
Right.
But it was just requiring that we do it in a certain way, and I was like,
Okay,
this is crazy burdensome. It's just a report.
I can move it, but we still be compliant with the.
Yeah, because it was totally optional language, yeah. If you look at all the bullets, it says those are optional. I'm just saying, let's not put that in there because, you know, if you didn't do it accidentally one time, or you whatever, you know, it was, you violating policy or other. We're always gonna try to update it if we're letting people know we're changing our employment record.
I wanted to double check and make sure that in policy 5:20 that we do have the complaint managers listed. I think that might be one where, for some reason, it's blank.
That's the work document, that's not the one that posted. So what are you looking at right there?
Mm-hmm.
I think we still have Terry Bolden.
It's been changed on there. Yeah, because what you look at there, the link is to the work document, so anything that has split comes on is gonna be a work document.
Okay. And then the one I had lots of questions for. Policy 5:90, abuse and neglected child reporting. I'm curious, because if we adopt some of it, but not all of it, right? Regarding the training of the employees hired, right? Because we were worried about how we would go about that. My questions are, if we go with your suggestion in using Ed Leaders Network training for our employees, which I'm okay with, how are we making sure, are we currently tracking employees completing training on the detection, reporting, and prevention? Are we keeping it filed somewhere?
Ed Leaders Network creates a roster that shows who completed the training.
Right, okay.
That's correct.
Do we have a method in place right now? I'm just curious.
That's what we're using.
Okay.
So yeah, so that's how we have, you know, we have a roster.
2 years.
Every other year.
Also, building principals, I believe it's required every 5 years.
Okay.
And building principals keep a staff roster in the office with the date when the employee shows the completed certificate.
Okay. All right, then I'm fine with.
Are we doing that already?
We are.
Right?
We are
Okay.
doing it.
And I just wanted to verify that, because I wanted to be clear that I'm assuming, because I know that we have to do it at my employer, we have to track that and we have to re-certify or retrain, so I assumed it, I just wanted to make sure.
Yes, and we keep, those are updated every year minimum.
We maintain a database on leaders.
We have it through them, and then we have printed copies, we have hard copies. Yes. Correct. We have hard copies, we can also go to the web and get them, but we have hard copies.
Are we supposed to take part in that as well?
That's not part of your mandated training.
But we are mandated.
Yes, we are mandated
We're
reporters,
not mandated to be trained.
That's true.
which is contradictory, so.
That's true.
We can bring it up next year.
That could be. Or a.
If you did your board member training through the school board association, it's covered as part of their board member training presentation.
Thank you. Okay. Moving on to policy 5:100, staff development program. I like the numbered list of requirements. Did anyone else read that? And that means that I am putting my fellow board members on blast a little bit. And you can quote me on that. I said on blast. It means that I'm calling folks out if they didn't read it. So in this particular policy, it's just talking about helping maintain development for our staff in a number of different areas. And they have an option in the footnotes that we could include a list of requirements. I can be persuaded to not include the list of requirements, but I'd like to have a conversation about how we know and understand that we are helping our staff continue the development in these particular areas, because I think from what I hear from the community, that some of these areas are where I feel they feel we need to help continue support our staff in our district. So in regards to, I think there's specific training calling for teen dating violence, for cultural competency, etc. So.
Well, I will tell you the reason and it's generally a blanket recommendation whenever they give very specifics. I'm always leery because if the law changes and all of a sudden then we got to, I mean, it's just one more thing that we have to make sure we hit to make sure it got done. And not to say we wouldn't do the training, but then we didn't change the policy and now it's not compliant with the law. I just always like to have it where you'll see things like, please refer to the contract with the teacher's union, or, you know, that type of thing, where instead of, we're gonna do this, this, and this, oh, well, 5 laws changed, then you didn't update your policy. So that's why but I understand why you're saying what you're saying. I'm not saying we should have those trainings, but that's why I'm always reticent to put those enumerated, because when things change at Springfield.
How much of this enumerated training is mandated by statute?
All of those.
So every one of them?
Yeah.
So then my question goes back to my question with Ingram. How are we tracking that? Sorry.
Well, right, we go through the Ed Leaders Network, which goes through and gets all the enumerated ones, but then we also are audited by the ROE to make sure that we do all. So that's how we're held to that requirement. In my knowledge, we've not been dinged for that.
And if there are changes in statute, current policy will notify us so that we can make the appropriate changes.
Yes. At some point.
Hopefully.
Okay, and then for the suggestions that you had for 5:200 and 5:290, where you wanted to have that, to add that line as about the contract,
yes.
right?
Yes, those are, we should absolutely have those on there.
Yes, I agree, and I'm wondering, is it good practice then to have a link in the online document to that contract?
Oh, yeah, I mean, it sure would be great practice.
I mean, because if
We
that's
can do
what the
it,
policy
yeah.
says, that that's what we need to refer to, then I think it would be great if we could then link in the online version at least to that contract, so that if they want to look at something specific, they have the contract right there and they don't have to like go out of that window and et cetera, et cetera.
For everybody out in the audience, what we're talking about is links, just what I said before. Please refer to the collective bargaining agreement with this group. So to have a hot link to be able to click that if you're looking it up in the policy, that's a great. It doesn't currently do that, so.
And then finally, I think, policy 7:19. I couldn't really tell if there were major changes from what we currently use in our code of conduct. I think it was about student behavior. Oh yeah, 7:190. So student behavior. So before we bring that back for us as an action item, I just wanted to make sure if there was any major language that departed from what we had hashed out in our code of conduct?
It was exactly what was written in the other policy. I'll
Okay.
tell you that.
Okay, that's what I couldn't, there was so much there that I just couldn't.
References.
Okay.
That was it.
Okay. That's all I wanted to make sure. And I just laugh and crack up every time I read the line about pagers are being prohibited, because I'm like, really, doesn't anybody use a pager anymore?
No 8-track cassettes.
But hey, the state says we have to keep it in there, so. I think I have some other little stuff, but that's not, policy 7:3, the last one, 340. We don't collect biometric data, do we?
No, but this is an ad from the state. This is an addition on the state policy, their recommended policy, that includes biometric information that our current policy does not have. Right now, our policy is mute on biometric information. We don't collect any, but this would guide us if
we did.
Someone decided to do that.
Well, we could have our doors open with some biometric cards, and so we would have collecting that information.
If we did,
If we
yes.
ever did that, yeah.
Correct.
Actually, that's an option for food service.
Mhm.
Oh, really?
Where you just give your fingerprint and then the student's name pulls up instead of having a card. That's something we've never investigated.
My previous district started that process and then quickly ended it.
Right, greasy pads.
With that, it was violation of privacy, and there was a lot of other things that really got into, you probably don't want to go down this road.
I wouldn't want to ask our students for their fingerprints. Or maybe some of our employees, I don't know. Okay, those were all the questions or things I had about the policy packet. Did anybody else have anything? Sorry that took so long.
I have one more that hasn't been covered yet.
Okay.
On substitute teachers, and I don't know if this is anything we need word on. Your recommendation is to approve it as written on here. On the old one, it has a section in there that it says that we can employ a sub in an emergency for a vacant position. This doesn't have that in there. I don't know if it needs to have that in there. For instance, school starts and we don't have a position filled. We don't have a regular teacher for a regular classroom. We can employ a substitute for that. I don't know if we need that language.
Well,
The other one has
law
it,
says
so-
we can do that,
Yeah,
so.
So
I mean,
it's just redundant to
Might be
have
a
it in
question
there.
for Luke. I just said, well, there's nothing in here that precludes us from doing it.
Yeah, well,
so
that's why I thought maybe it was just a redundant thing, but it's because I'd had it in there and just didn't, I thought,
It would be one
I
thing
don't
if
want us to have
policy
an
says
empty
we can't.
classroom, because we can't, so.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
it's fully in compliance with
Okay.
the law, so I mean, not putting it on, my way of thinking was, we don't have to have it on there because we already are.
Right, okay. That's what I thought probably, I just want to check.
All right, any other questions?
So we'll make those changes for next month. And then, the next thing is, do we want to add another section?
Well, next time we have to approve the things that we just. talked
Correct, but then we'd
about.
have a first reading for the other ones, so we would have action for this, discussion for section 3. I just want to make sure we're still there, so. So we're good with section 3 next time?
What is section 3?
Section 3 is, what?
Order.
We'll find out.
Oh, it's a mystery.
I can't even remember. I never noticed.
Oh, good.
Easy.
We all know
We
that.
go to 4, 5, 6, 7.
Okay.
So we'll do section 3 next time on first reading discussion. We'll make these changes that were recommended here, and we'll make sure those are reflected for next month in the action.
General school administration.
Oh, that's fine. You want to do 3 and 4? Because 3 is really short.
Yeah, it's only 7 sections.
All right.
Sounds good.
All right, 3 and 4. 4 is longer. All right. We'll put 3 and 4.
Sorry. I want to take away paper. Operational services.
Yeah, but it's not horrible. See, some of these other maps, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Seven.
Okay.
4 next month. Got it.
All right, wonderful, thank you. Moving forward to the next discussion item, the boundary study, Dr. Axel.
Thank you. So I put this on here because last month, Member Statham and Member Pickrell had said that we wanted to make sure we stayed on top of this. And I wanted you to know that we are, and Mrs. Ham and I, if I have time, will be going through the training on it's on 5 cast or 5 slide.
5 maps.
Oh, well, there's another 5. 5 maps, it's a software suite we've already paid for. 5 maps should be, much like the Padcaster, should be here and ready to go prior to next month. So if all goes according to plan, next month, we hopefully will be able to give you an overview of how that boundary study works on the software. The one thing I did want to talk to the board about before we went that far, and this is just the world according to me, so I wanted to make sure that everybody was on board with this, and if not, I definitely needed to hear it now. I would like to figure out a way to make sure that we fill up Steele and Silas Willard to capacity because they're air conditioned through our boundary study. Is there any violent protest to that? Is there a big concern? Because this year I know we left, Steele is not completely full. And so I thought it would be putting money into making sure those are air conditioned. Are we okay with expanding those boundaries a bit to make sure that those 2 schools are full and are meeting capacity?
2 things. I mean, I think one of the reasons you do the boundary study every year is building utilization. The other is, that was a huge thing on our community survey. So I think you're accomplishing 2 things by doing that. It's just in line with exactly what you said. Later on the agenda, we have the enrollment numbers for each school. I would like to know one additional number for each school. You know, what's the capacity?
We'll add that.
You know,
I'll make sure the principals have that on their report for next month.
under our current contracts, the number of classrooms we have.
Thank you. Now, capacity by the fire code, is that what we're looking for? Like,
I was thinking under the number of classrooms in our current.
Okay, I just want to make sure we're all dealing with the same assumptions here.
Yeah.
And that should be on the current enrollment report on the first page. It lists by school, and then it'll list the classrooms and how many are in each classroom. The first tab. Yeah. If you look at the first tab, the second tab is a summary, and then the first tab is each classroom, K through 5.
Oh, okay, I look in the first tab. So,
Thank you. Me and technology.
I'm surprised. So we're looking at numbers where? Can you show us up there? You just,
Oh, yeah.
So that'll show me how many students Silas Willard.
Right, like if you look at Gale, if I can do that, my apologies. So that first person has 21 people in their class in kindergarten.
No, I
There's
wanna
a
know,
25.
I wanna know how many kids under the current GEA contract I could put.
she wants you to do
Right,
math.
and then right there, see where it says 25 at the top, that shows you the contractual limits
Right.
for kindergarten, first grade, second grade, and then you move to 3rd grade, 27.
But this isn't showing 50 classrooms, does it?
Right, so no, I see,
Right,
I see your
so you
point.
also want to know like
So-
the actual physical space.
I wanna know how many classrooms.
I got it.
Okay.
I got it. So we'll be able to say total enrollment possible.
Yeah.
I got it.
I think it's important too, though, that, I mean, it's nice that Steele and Silas have the air conditioning, but when you hear teachers at certain schools say, oh my gosh, it's the best year ever because I only have so many kids in my class, but other ones are filled to the rim. At the contract size, I mean, I get that those buildings are ideal, but there's still an unevenness among all buildings as far as classrooms.
Right, and I wasn't trying to say, tell me how many kids I can cram into
Right,
Silas
but,
Willard.
right, but if it's there.
I just wanted to know.
Well,
wanted to
and
know.
I wouldn't, I'm not planning to replace it, just to add that one more data point. So I think all this is good, it's just adding one more.
It also makes it different what type of classrooms you've got in there. I mean,
Absolutely.
just special ed, if you've got a special ed classroom that, you know, can only have, I mean, just having rooms available and saying, oh, well, I can do this, but if you've got certain populations that are going to certain schools, that's gonna make a difference too.
Well, and that's why I think, to Member Staten's point, that would be reflected in the total cost. We would make sure we had that in there. We're not gonna say, oh, we can make sure to put 25 kids in this PE classroom. We're not doing that, so.
Well, even just to know how many empty rooms there are, because when I count the Gales right now, there's 14 classrooms being used, is that correct? For students, and 6 times 3 is 18, there are 4 empty classrooms. Is that right?
The life skills classrooms might not be in those numbers.
I think so, yeah, I'm counting them in there.
Yeah, they're in there.
We do, because we have the life skills classroom, have to have an empty classroom for adaptive PE.
Okay, so there's another room that, okay, so we would probably need a lot more data than just gross numbers.
Well, we'll just have to have like for each building, understand you need this room for this space. We can just have that as a static, standing data. So, yeah, we can get.
3 empty rooms, yeah.
That'll take us,
Thank you.
We'll get it. So that was my point in the boundary study. I just wanted you to know, we are working on it, you know, we're trying to make sure. And we very much plan to just project that data for everybody that wants to look at it to see. I mean, it's not gonna be some big secret. I mean, we'll put it up there and say this is what it looks like for next year. Proceed from there.
I also want to note when we talk about the elementary school boundaries, we talk about the steel building, the Willard buildings, it's not just air conditioning. I think we also need to look at, they have a separate eating facility than the multipurpose room. They have different functions of rooms that we put in. At Willard, I think there's a number of rooms that have bathrooms in the classrooms as well. Is that correct? 3 of them?
Kindergarten.
Those are, it's not just that we put air conditioning. There are other functions in those buildings that make them advantageous for many classrooms.
Okay, any other questions or comments about the boundary study?
So you're doing that in-house with your, okay.
We'll have some information, like we're in the process of seeing if we can overlay, like park scores, we'll have free and reduced populations, so we'll be able to see that as well. By each school boundary.
So we could really make boundaries such that each elementary school may have free meals. The entire district could.
We're really at the point that we can all be CPI schools, but there is a cost to that, and we can have that discussion. I think we have to make that decision by April. I have to ask Mrs. Weber about that.
Okay.
We're at the point where we really could be CPI district-wide.
Like these.
Okay. Next discussion item, secretarial handbook, Dr. Aslan.
Thank you. We've just made a few slight alterations to the secretarial handbook to clarify some language. Nothing in there is really changing any reality for any secretary. I mean, it's just cleaning up some language that need to be cleaned up to verify and to establish to make sure that going forward, everybody understood the at-will nature of that position. It didn't change anything. It was just clarifying language.
This will be an action item next month.
Yes.
So does anyone have any questions about that, since it'll be an action item next month?
What's that machine in front of you?
Yeah.
You can update the graphics.
Yeah, maybe.
It's a woman in a typewriter.
It's a typewriter. Yeah, might have to change it to a
That's
Okay. If there are no questions other than comments about the graphics? We can move to a discussion about the community meeting presentation. Does anybody have questions about the information that Dr. Asplund presented at the beginning of our meeting? No board members have thoughts about the changing of the agenda or what was proposed and how we might structure the board committees to reflect what we received as feedback from our community.
General question. What if committee, whatever agenda, is, like, going forward, are you gonna take different pieces of the feedback that present them? Like, is this just step one? Or do we, there's a lot of other things that are obviously found out.
Well, and we
So
can,
it's just a step in the process.
what I would recommend is that those committees meet, and if they want to look at the individual feedback points from those meetings, we have them ready to do that.
Okay.
What I was presenting tonight was more themes to try to promote a direction.
Okay.
So that would be up to the individual committees to talk about how they want to use that data, but it's definitely available.
We will we see the change to our agendas.
Well, I can start, I can throw out a potential, format to everybody and say, hey, what do you think of this? Ask for feedback individually, obviously, and then I can, tweak it as I get feedback from people until we get to what it is we, it wouldn't look vastly different than what we have now, other than right now we as you know, we put it in order of action, personnel, discussion, report. Whereas we would look more to focus area 1, action, discussion, committee reports. Focus 2, action, discussion, committee reports. Focus 3, so that it's always out there in front and everybody knows these are the focus areas. And then the committees would have reports within those areas, but if we didn't have a committee meet that month, I wouldn't put it as a discussion item that month because the committee didn't meet. But there would be much more focused activity for those committees to meet to talk about what they were trying to do. So it's just really about transparency and making sure that everybody keeps those issues on the forefront every month.
If we're looking to change the format, maybe at the same time to revisit that question about moving the time of closed sessions as well. Still interested in that.
Anything's possible.
We did have a discussion, I'm not reading this, right?
At the time, it was decided to leave it where it was and deal with it later if we felt like it. So I just kind of left that out there as whatever we felt like. I wasn't going to bring it up.
Yes, we did.
I just,
Well, I will put out formats, and then it'll be generic, obviously, but then you can give feedback.
Matt, Jam, 5.
So I think one of the other suggestions I will make at this juncture that could possibly be a future agenda item, and I know that moves a different point, but as we were thinking about changing the agenda structure to meet the themes that we've pulled from the community meetings and looking at the boundary, et cetera, we're reviewing our policies. I'm also wondering if this would be a great time where in January, our board has been functioning like this for 6 months. Our superintendent has been employed for 6 months. I'm wondering if we want to put on as a discussion item for next month the idea of having a board self-evaluation to kind of take stock. Where are we? What's working? What do we think we need to improve on? And that kind of falls in line with some of the changes that we're thinking about making to the agenda. Do I have any thoughts, comments, questions from fellow board members about the self-evaluation?
What kind of format were you thinking of?
Well, in order for us to have a very honest, candid conversation about where we feel we are. I think in order to stay in line with statute, that would have to be proctored, right, by a member of ISB, or IASB, to come in and help us evaluate that, because then it would allow us to go into a closed session to have a conversation about our board functions. Because it would be led by a member of the Illinois Association of School Boards. So we can have that discussion next month if there's any, or if there's any data that you would like Dr. Asplund to gather, so that we could have an informed discussion next month about that possibility.
I will send another email to Rita on our field services rep to ask for just a short description of what that would look like and cost. Just so
And I think that because we attended the joint conference, we have some discounts.
Should.
Okay. All right. Any other questions or comments about the community meeting presentation? All right, then we'll move to administrative reports. Update on district building projects.
I have no updates.
Do we have a window yet?
Yeah.
It's
obvious
that it's the wrong one.
It's the right one.
At least it's a window. Still in the process of being ordered.
I get a lot of questions about this.
You have a question about this?
No, I said I get a lot of questions about it from taxpayers and communities.
They, oh,
I'd like to give an update when
okay.
I can, but there's.
Hey, class is better when it's 20 below zero.
Yes.
This is great.
All right. Curriculum, Dr. Asplund.
we continue to work. We've had to put our administrator meeting off a couple times now because of the weather, but we're gonna have it next week and talk about, or 2 weeks from now, and plan for the very specific activities that will go on February 16th. When we will staff again to vertically then articulate our essential skills K through pre-K through 12. So K through 12 is what we're pre-K. But very excited about that, and if all goes as planned, then sometime in the spring, we would be asking you all to approve that. So we're still on schedule.
Any questions? Okay, Human Resources, Dr. Brecker, or Mr. Brecker.
Thank you.
Let's establish that's a mission. One more time.
We're gonna have a meeting to discuss with the custodial staff some reorganization of cleaning zones. The GHS will meet together to discuss that. Maybe bringing you some modified job descriptions after that discussion. We had an insurance training with UMR and Cunningham Butler come down. Very, very beneficial, specifically on providing ways of communicating more information quickly to the employees, which I'm excited about. Recruiting dates are coming up. We've got 2 in February, Northern Illinois University and Illinois State University coming up, so we look forward to getting that going.
Questions for Mr. Brecker? Okay. Dr. Rashad, special ed. I'm not a push button. Two great things in special ed, sorry, he's trying to give me button training. 2 great things in special ed. One is we have a great training coming up this Wednesday on dealing with difficult students, the behavior process, what we can do through the IEP process, and that'll happen to all the special ed staff. And then right before winter break, I was informed that we have 7 students in the STEP program that currently work at Hy-Vee on Henderson. And that Hy-Vee store got the customer service award for the area. So all 7 students, even though they only work at a few hours a day, each received a $100 bonus as a part of that process. So we thought that was awesome. I don't know that we've ever had anything like that before. So just kudos to our students out there working. So
February training, we have Brandon Wright coming in to do the impact of the Andrew F. case on writing IEPs and documenting what we're doing. So that's all I have at this time.
Questions? Okay. We've already kind of touched base on the January enrollment report, but does anybody have any additional questions?
So we get one of those every month?
They come out every month. I assumed the board gets them.
Yeah, not every month. We get them every month, sorry. We get them, we give them out periodically.
I was just curious, because I don't have a good memory, what was the mid-year decrease last year over the previous year? I noticed we went down 2% this year over last year.
I can't access that. I want to say we were down 61 students, but
Yes.
don't quote me on that. Is it 61?
Yes.
As opposed to last year.
As opposed to last year?
No, what I meant was,
But what was last
this year we
year's,
went down 2% over last year.
what was last year over the
What was
previous year?
last year's decrease over the
I
previous?
can find out.
Yeah, we'll find
Oh,
out.
that's okay. I was just,
We'll find out.
I was just curious. I thought it was a little higher than 2% that year. Just wondered if it was leveling off a little bit. Got to sometime. It's gonna stop sometime.
Okay, building reports. Any questions from our principals?
I have two questions about reports. One's at Lombard, it's okay. You mentioned that you had an activity for, guys and ties, I don't know what that is. But imagine it's an entertainment activity, and 85% of the students were in the privilege to attend. What does it mean to earn a privilege, and what do the other 15% do?
Actually, what we do, since we're a PBIS
Can you speak
school,
up, I'm sorry.
since we're a PBIS school, we try to do incentives where there's certain benchmark criteria that have to do with their behavior, that they earn the privilege to attend. So kids that didn't have an office discipline referral were able to attend. So 85% of the student body were able to attend that. The other 15% were actually with me, but it's not a consequence. What it essentially is kind of an
For
opportunity.
you, maybe, but
I enjoyed it. I mean, honestly, it's an opportunity to reteach kind of over expectations and have an opportunity to reflect on what happened, what occurred, and if you weren't able to attend.
Okay, so how long would that session, how long was guys and ties?
About an hour.
Then I have another question that's probably relevant to all the reports. When it has out-of-school suspension and it has 8, is that 8 days or 8 separate events? Or it's 2, whatever the number may be. Those are separate events. So,
Mine's written a little bit differently because I have some half days, like I put it by event and then total.
right, those aren't obviously have children. So a school that has a 10 in that cell would mean they had 10 separate out-of-school suspensions during that month, correct? Is it of value to know how many cumulative days that was? I mean, what's the average suspension, for example? 2 days, 3, I don't know.
Depend on the incident.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. As you can see by the agenda, our committee reports are on hold as we revamp our structure. Unless you had anything to report from insurance. No. All right, comments by the board. I usually always start on my right, so I'll start on my left, Member Banks.
No comment except to, I shouldn't say no comment. I just want to just keep praising all of you for all of the good stuff you're doing and all the kindness things. I just love reading all the raising money for school desks in Africa and helping with the canned food drive and all that kind of stuff, and I don't think we can do enough of that, I have too much of that, and I wanna make sure that you understand that it's very much appreciated, and kudos to all of you for all that you do.
Member Stephen?
Thank you. I was hoping Mr. Houston would be here, but I don't see him.
He's supervising the basketball.
Okay. This is the only chance I get to talk to a group of principals all at once. I had two parents come to me about a new high school teacher we hired, a science teacher. And he sent home a document to the parents in the class, basically asking each parent, what's the best way to communicate with you? What are your expectations for my class? Are there anything in particular in this topic area you'd like me to concentrate on? I wish I had it in front of me. And I've never seen two parents more excited about a teacher. I mean, they were just over the top. And an idea for you principals, if you could implement something like this. I mean, these two parents came and said, and I don't even know if one of them is really going to want to be that involved, but it was a teacher reaching out to parents saying, hey, I've got your kid, here's your chance to give me some input. And it was just, he just left a space. It's a brand new teacher, I don't know where he learned it. But he just blew away at least two parents who took the time, one of them actually took the time to come to my office, walk in the door, and I knew both these parents, and say, look at this. The school district is really doing something right. And I said, well, I think that was the teacher initiative. And they said, well, you hired one great teacher. If you guys could think of implementing something like that with your teachers, bringing it up when you, I mean, I love it when teachers get brought in, and when teachers try to engage parents, and it's just one little gesture that made these parents feel a huge part of their child's education, just by answering like 5 questions. But they really felt drawn in, so I wanted to pass that along because if more of our teachers could do that, I think it would really help. But I often see this lack of connect between teachers, parents, things like that. So I just wanted to bring that up.
Can I still bring it in? I forgot something. You made me think of it because again, I wanted to compliment the principals because I was talking to some substitute teachers in preparation just to get some background information and stuff. And I heard lots and lots and lots of wonderful things about the principals and how supportive they are of the substitutes and how they greet them and make them feel like they're part of the school and all of that. And I didn't hear one negative thing, so I wanted to pass that on too.
Member Lang?
Well, I have a non-school related thing I'd like to mention. Monday, there's not school, it's the Dr. King holiday. And for around, 27 years or something, there's a breakfast sponsored by Martin Luther King Celebration Committee at First Lutheran Church. Breakfast, this poster doesn't say the time, 7 o'clock, doors open. And as part of it, we have essay winners read their essays, and both middle schools were asked to have students submit. I wasn't part of the reading process this year, so I don't know what the turnout. And they all focused on Thurgood Marshall, who's the 50th year of his ascension to the bench, or 60th. 2017 was the 50th anniversary of his ascension to the bench, the Supreme Court. So everyone's invited. We hope to see a lot of school people there, and it's Monday morning at 7 a.m. First Lutheran. I meant to bring tickets, but the ones they gave me, I can't find them. I have a poster. Thank you.
Member Glassovich?
I wanted to make a comment about, community closed school for weather. And I know it's a tough call to make, but I appreciate it being done in a timely fashion to give people a chance to make their plans. And I just want to remind the community, I know there's not a lot of non-school people here, that lots of times when I was working in school, I would hear comments by the community, oh, they got another day off, they got another day off, and I just kept repeating, we work the same number of days, no matter what. So don't worry about it, the kids will have the same number of days, no matter what, and the teachers are working the same number of days, no matter what. So it's not a free day, it's a day that has to be made up later on. And oftentimes, the more days we have, then the teachers start getting upset because it's going too far into, oh gosh, you can't go into June. So, but I do appreciate it. I know it's a hard call, and always I think we need to go on the side of safety. And I think that's what you've done, so thank you. Central office is always open.
Member Sherby? Member Pickering?
Just to follow up with Mr. Statham said, that was a great example of what they're doing at the high school, but sorry. My kids get excited the first day of school because they bring home homework for their parents, for me, not dad, and it's those questions, it's what's your kid like, what do you, so I think they are doing it, probably not every teacher, but I did want to, just mention that I get homework the first day of school. Again, they're just elementary for now, but just trying to find out more about the student and, how to get hold of me, all that, so. It's great, especially to know that it continues on through years in school. Hopefully my more teachers now by bringing it up even, so.
I will add just a few things, because I'll give a shout out personally, Mr. Baxter at the high school. He may not send a note home, but when my son was a student in his class, he makes a point to find something positive to say about every student in his class and to call home at some point during the term to a parent to say, I'm just calling to tell you how wonderful your student is. And I know that I have heard in the past how surprised they were, a parent gets a phone call from a teacher, oh my gosh, what did my kid do? But then the conversation on the other end of the phone is, no, there's nothing wrong, I just want to tell you how great your student is. And I remember when I got that phone call from Mr. Baxter, he's so inquisitive. And that made my day because he was actually challenged about being inquisitive when he was in middle school. And so the fact that a teacher acknowledged him for asking all of those questions, I think also made his day. So the other thing I will add on for the Martin Luther King celebration is the keynote is Tony Franklin, who is a dynamic man who has worked with the University of Illinois Extension and done a lot of work around issues of diversity and inclusivity, and it, has done some work in higher ed as well. So if you have an opportunity to attend that breakfast, I had the honor of being keynote last year, and it's a great event. So are there any future agenda items?
I still want us to address the parking situation at the school.
Okay. And now we will go into motion to go into closed session for the appointment employment. Okay, hold on. So Wayne and Amy. Allison? Aye.
Aye.
Yes. Aye.
Aye.
I'm in the back. Steering the ship.